It's all right. Let's continue the focus on the Sona. Cosatu regards the State of the Nation address as one of the most important events on the government's calendar. The Trade Union Federation says the president needs to step up and prove that he is committed to fixing the broken economy and fighting the scourge of corruption. Well, Cosatu's first deputy president, Mike Shingange, is here in studio with me. These are two critical points, Mr. Shingange. Corruption and fixing the broken economy so that jobs can be created. Let's begin perhaps with the last one, fixing the broken economy in order to improve or make sure that job creation happens. In practical terms, what is it that you want?
Look, the first thing that we are watching very close in the State of the Nation address is the president to be consistent with what he promised the people of South Africa during the manifesto that they delivered. Because from where we stand, the manifesto proposes all the right things that must happen. But we want a detach from what we have come to know, that the president of the country, in his capacity as the president of the ruling party, will say something else to electorals through a manifesto or through a January statement, but later go to the Sona and say something else. So our view is that we have a practical resolution, for instance, that comes from the job summit that he convened, the practical resolutions that come from the investment summit. We need plans, concrete and coherent plans that are going to say exactly how we're going to implement those resolutions. Because recently we have now seen that the parties involved in the job summit and the parties involved in the investment summit are beginning to speak different languages. Some of them are beginning to speak retrenchments. Some of them are beginning to threaten to withhold the investment if 1, 2, 3 things doesn't happen. So our view is that how is it that the president is going to say this is the government plan to make sure that everybody concerned is committed in implementing those two? We know that, for instance, the economy is shedding jobs in the retail sector, in the mining sector, in the agricultural sector. So what is it that the government plans to hold the job path that we are facing in this country? The retrenchments that are threatened through SOEs, fixing them as they're broken as they are, but also making sure that the innocent people that did not contribute to the dilapidating state of the SOEs are not the ones that are punished through retrenchments, but the people who actually brought it down, which the management and the boards. What is the plan of government to make sure that they hold them accountable?
Let's then move on to the issue of fighting the scourge of corruption. Are you satisfied with what you are seeing so far?
We are satisfied with the amount of work that has been done by all the inquiries that the commissions that have been set up. You will note that, for instance, when you talk to the state of capture, for example, we as Cosatu went on the street in 2017 in September, demanding that the commission of inquiry must be set up, demanding that people who were found to be done wrong must appear in that commission and clear their names or otherwise be held accountable. What we are worried, though, what we are calling the president to ensure, although we don't want him to interfere, is that the state agencies that are responsible for law enforcement must begin to do their part. I mean,
well, someone will say the Bosasa executives have now been charged and they appeared in court. A former commissioner of the correctional services is appearing in court, well, expected to appear in court today.
Yes.
Are those steps
correct,
convincing for you that are being taken right now?
They are a step in the right direction, but we expect more. I mean, the revelations that are out there, there's an issue of the NPA itself. There's an issue of the hawks themselves. So we need to be confident that the steps have been taken to go deeper into those institutions so that they are cleaned up, they are strengthened. There's an issue about SAPS itself. You can't just now, because last week there was Agrizi on Zondo, and then we're acting now as if there have not been allegations before. I mean, there are many people that are still hovering, even in cabinet, even in parliament, even in many other positions, that many allegations have been leveled
against. What
needs
to happen to those people? It's interesting that you bring them up, that yes, indeed, we see the Agrizis, we see the officials, the bureaucrats who were involved in this Bosasa mess, for example. But where are those whose hands were greased?
Exactly. His hands are greased by the agrees. The point we're making is that we need to be confident. You need to show that they're serious about it, so that you don't just go for soft targets. You don't just go to low-hanging officials. You must go to those who, or on whose instructions, these corrupt activities have taken place, and some of which are surrounding him there in cabinet. So we say he must be bold on this point in time.
So what would need to happen, for example, on a day like this, where he's going to stand up there and talk tough, yes, presumably, on corruption, yet in the cabinet there are people like Nomvula Mokonyane, Gwede Mantashe, you name them, that have been implicated in this Bosasa mess. How does he deal with that, or how does he talk convincingly about that whilst you have such people sitting?
We need to see a recommitment and emphasize the fact that his government is not going to tolerate those, and steps are going to be taken. And if you remember, Justice, through our statement 2 days ago, we actually even made it a point that those who are appearing on all those of inquiries, that in fact it's our view that his cabinet is going to be tainted, in the government of the ANC is going to be tainted, must actually find a mechanism to remove themselves from the list that is going to be sold to the South Africans that are going to vote.
That those who are implicated in the Bosasa scandal should not be attending Parliament today, because otherwise they're going to weaken the President's message?
Not necessarily attending Parliament, but they shouldn't be part of his government going forward. That's the point we're making.
Yeah, but if they're still in Parliament, it weakens his message.
Well, this government is coming to an end in a few weeks' time. He must make sure that in his coming cabinet, in his coming Parliament, in the list that is going to Parliament, those people are not there.
Mr. Shingange, just on the last point I want to touch on, and it still has to do with corruption. Recently, your allies, the ANC and SACP, they've come out very strongly against these 5 countries who called for visible action in the fight against corruption. In your view, are they justified in doing that when you yourself are saying here right now that we need to see the actual action that is being taken in as far as corruption is concerned?
Everybody who is fighting crime and corruption is justified. The question could be the manner in which and the method they are using. We have also, alongside the SACP and the ANC, come out strongly against the method in which they chose to use, to almost choose to threaten the sovereignty of the state, threaten the state president. In fact, even writing directly to the president, undermining the diplomatic channels that otherwise are used to be followed when we want to engage with a particular country. So we're saying, in this country, we have got the rule of law. In this country, in particular over the last 12 years, we're doing everything that we can, led by the president, to fight corruption. Surely people who want to invest in this country must do so within the parameters of the rule of law that exists in South Africa, but also expecting and respecting the sovereignty of the country. So everybody who fights corruption is justified, but we do not appreciate an intimidation tactic that's being used by these 5 countries. We do not appreciate the fact that they will threaten the state president. We do not appreciate that they will violate the process that are normally supposed to be followed. So we think they must leave us alone. They must invest within the confines of the law of this country.
They must invest and yet leave you alone in as far as fighting corruption is concerned.
No, it's not their baby. I mean,
so they must bring in their money. But
they must bring in their money and trust that the law enforcement in this country is going to make sure that their money is protected. Their money, what we do not appreciate is almost something like telling the country what to do, telling the government how to run their country, telling a ruling party how to develop their policies. It's almost a regime change kind of attempt that they are doing. That we will never agree.
All right.
We have seen what they've done in other countries, in Latin America and everywhere. That will never allow them to do in South Africa.
Thank you very much for making the time to come and talk to us. Mike Shingange, he is Cosatu's first deputy president.